everybody doing? Yeah, I got a question. I just had a random thing, and I really don't know who this is going to land on. If you came in here today and you're like, yeah, man, I was really needing a garbage can. The Lord is providing. No, I'm not giving you a trash can. But we can, if you're that desperate, we can hook you up. But anyway, I'm just wondering, is there anybody in here who says, you know, Danny, I just really need a little something sweet, a little encouragement today. I just really need something sweet. You got to raise a hand. It doesn't count if you don't raise a hand. I just want, hold your hand up, because I got to kind of pick. I just was walking through the store this morning, and I walked past something, and I love it when some of y'all won't even hold your hand, but you're holding the hand of your spouse trying to get what's coming. So cheating. But anyway, I walked through, and I looked, and I was like, I just feel like I need to buy this and surprise somebody. So I don't have something for everybody, but I do believe I got a little something. I can't help it. They're cheesing too big over here. There you go. Enjoy. That's true, weird kind of story. Anyway, good morning. How's everybody doing? Awesome. I'm wondering in here today if there is anybody. Last week we talked about extending grace. We talked about, making allowance for each other's faults. That we allow Jesus to be seen by the room that we make. And I'm just wondering, did anybody get the opportunity to, kind of hold back, and you found yourself actually a little less opinionated this week. You may not have been less opinionated, but you vocalized it less. Or maybe you can think of an opportunity where you intentionally, there was something you wanted to point, but instead you just kept your fingers in your pockets and kept on, scratching your leg or whatever you did to fake it out. You may have stunk in the first part of the week, but at least you did something good by the end of the week. Anybody in here kind of get a little opportunity this week and you let it go? Awesome. Wasn't it freeing? Isn't it liberating to just, wow, 4 people. Praise God. Well, today, I want you to see, today you have got what it takes. And you received a paper today that looks something like, well, mine's got something on it, but it says My 5. I want to encourage you. Please save it. It is, I promise, the most important paper you have ever had in your hands. I guarantee it. You may not understand it, but we've got weird ways that we can pray for things, and it has supernatural ability in things. No, it is not like a cloth that is going to heal your sickness, but it does way better than that. And I promise you, it has supernatural powers, but you're going to have to kind of hang to the end that we reveal what it says. Do not write on it. Do not doodle it. Do not make spitballs and throw it at your friends or snot rocket. Whatever. I digress. I got to quit. But I'm just telling you, save it. No writing on it. It's very, 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 very important. And it really is supernaturally powered paper. And that is not a joke. I mean, it's really not. I know it sounds weird. But can I tell you this? We're talking about you've got what it takes. Do you realize you've got what it takes to see lives changed in this region, to see people rescued by Jesus in this community, to see people rescued by Jesus wherever you may be, wherever your normal area of life may be? I'm just going to use an example. If you've ever been faithful to tithe, and I'll just, to remove some of the awkward, no, this is not a tithing message, but, money's not an awkward thing in the church, but still, if you've ever been faithful to tithe, you may not realize, you may have just considered it as letting something go from your hand. And just a simple transaction as that, just saying, I'm just being faithful and just letting it go. And you had no idea, literally, that when you gave, there were children that were rescued off of the streets of Peru. You have no idea that when you gave, actually, you gave what it took to see children who had been kicked out because of disabilities and left to live until they could live no more on their own because they were an embarrassment to their family, to have a home, not just as children, but throughout their entire adulthood through the Jim Foundation. And you may not have realized it, but through your giving, you actually provided that a mom who used to prostitute because it was the way to make money for her family and there was no other way, she discovered a new way. She was provided for, nurtured, learned about Jesus, rescued, and now has a better way to provide for her family without having to sell her body. You do not realize the magnitude of what it is that you give to when you give, is what I'm saying. And this is not a money message, but it's such an easy example, because so often, see if you agree with me or not, so often it is easy to feel like, what I have does not matter. My part is not that significant, so it's not really that big of a deal. And so what we do is we devalue the potential that God has given us. We devalue the potential that God's given us. I remember being on a mission trip one time, and I just happened to be sitting in the right place at the right time to hear this conversation. But I heard the missionary talking to another lady who actually was interning and serving there for a lot of months. And I just happened to be there. And he told her, he said, you had no idea. He said, when you thought you had nothing to give, and that $5 you sent a month was the $5 that paid for a whole week of feeding the people down here and the things that you're getting to do now. You see, sometimes we think what we give is way too small, so it does not matter. It is not that significant. But equally, if not more damaging, is there's the other side of the coin. And there's the side of the coin that says, you know what? I know I've got what it takes, and I know I could. And one day I will. You know, I'm just not right now. I know one day I'm going to. And we really believe that we have something that it takes. We believe that God has created us for a plan, for a purpose. Even believe you got some talents that can be used. But rather than use it, we just sit on it. And I dare say sitting on it is even worse than thinking I don't have it. You know, do you realize that what happens when we sit on it? And we're actually sitting on the very thing of what it takes to bring about the change that God literally created you for. Personally, individually, in this time frame, in this era of history. How many of you believe there needs to be a real Jesus revolution in our time? How many of you love reading about great revolutions that have happened in the past for good? Well, you are somebody's past. And they're looking forward, people that are not born yet are looking forward to things, hopes they have of reading what Jesus did in your day and how it's going to affect them then. You know, nothing good, can I say this, nothing good ever comes from sitting on it. If you will, just kind of break the ice a little bit. Will you high five three people around you and just give them a big old high five and say, you got it, now don't sit on it. I've always been inspired by people who don't necessarily seem to have it given to them. You know, I don't know that anybody really has it given to them. I know when you get close to people, everybody has a backstory, and everybody has a battleground. Even when it looks like they got a cakewalk, there's been a battleground in the back. But I've always been inspired by people who don't appear to have it handed to them, but people who continually they seem to work what they got. Whatever it is, they just seem to make something out of it, and they seem to work what they've got. They're not going to cause anything just to let them sit down where they are. They're not going to allow it to set them back and just to sit on it. And there's a champion in here that, if I can say, I checked with him, he inspires me on most weeks. He inspires me actually every week. I say most weeks, and that's actually a lie. He inspires me every week. And he's a champion, and he goes along as a silent champion, but I'm about to bust his name out of the mix. So some of you are going to be like, who is that? And I'm just going to allow him to shine for himself, and I'm not going to point because that would be awkward. That would kind of be like, if it's your first time today, would you please stand? And you know how awkward that would be. So, but his name is Danny Sims. And Danny Sims, the reason he inspires me so much is because I know a little bit of the story of a man who once lived here. And then he moved from here and moved to a place called Alabama to get away from problems that were here. How many of you all have ever thought, you know what, I just need to get away from wherever the problem exists? But yet God builds him up, and God makes a new man out of him, and he gets married to his wife Jan. And then one day, all of a sudden, I don't know how this all came about, but they said, you know what, I believe God is telling us to go back to Louisiana. And so he leaves a good-paying job in Alabama, a life that he had gotten to where he really liked, getting to have a job that he really enjoyed, getting to do things that he enjoyed to do, serving a ministry that he really enjoyed to serve. But it felt like God was saying, you know, it's time to move back to Louisiana, move back to the place that you felt like you had to run from. And so they come back here and kind of find their way in the flow. And then they come back and kind of landed on what a lot of people in here probably landed on at some point and said, you know, there's just not any jobs here. So it moves from a good job to a job of cleaning coolers. How many of you know cleaning coolers in a convenience store doesn't pay the bills? And so he's blessed to know a man like myself who can hook him up with another job that's equally as bad. So he doesn't sit on it. He doesn't just say, man, I'm too good for this, and I'm above this, and I've been treated way better than this, and I've worked jobs better than this. I'm not going to be reduced to this. Instead, he just continued to work what he had where he was. And so he went from one job to a second job. But still, in the second job, he didn't just sit on it and say, he didn't never sit around and say what wasn't available. He just kept going, and he kept giving. And I know he kept giving because in the midst of doing the two jobs of things that really weren't all that great, He ended up also, he lived in Monterey. I lived in Sicily Island at the time, and he would cut down a tree in Monterey. He would cut it down and size it up and split it up and bust it up, stack it in the back of his truck, and then show up at my house, and I would pull up home to catch him leaving after he'd unloaded out of his truck again and stacked it nicely at my house. He just kept giving. This man kept looking for opportunities to give. Danny never sat on it. And then another opportunity opened up, and another opportunity opened up till he finally gets to be in the job that he wanted from the very beginning, but he was always told that he could not have because he did not have the correct connections to get there. But how many of you know it doesn't matter the connections you have? If you got a Jesus connection, you keep working what you got, the little things become big. But here's the neat thing. Many times he still doesn't sit on it. Many times a week, you can catch this man up here on a lawnmower in a tie on his lunch break. Come on, somebody. I tried to get a picture of you the other day, but you kept turning your back to me. I was like, I got to show God the roundup man on his lunch hour in his khakis and his nice shoes and just getting at it. He never sits on it, and yet he's inspired other people also to kind of step into it, because to him, whether you realize it or not, even if some of you know who he is, some of you are like, I know it's a guy in this room with you right now. He cares so much about you before he even knew you that he said, you know what, I want at least the part I can do is to contribute to making the grounds look nice when they come up, to at least show, you know what, a church cared enough to prepare for you, and we want it to be a nice, pleasant experience when you come up. This man inspires me because he had every reason along the way to say, I'm too good. But instead, he just continued to use what he had. He said, you know what, I may not have it, what I'm doing right now it may seem very small, but he never allowed the small things to get in the way of the big. Because, see, when you're faithful in the small, how many of you realize when we're faithful in the small, God begins to open up the doors that are bigger and bigger and bigger. He instead determined that, you know what, because of what I know about God and because of what I know about what Jesus has done to me, I'm going to stay faithful in the small until Jesus opens the next door. I guarantee, no matter what you are working with today, there are things also that you and I are always tempted to sit on because we think they're too small. We're tempted to sit on it because we think it's not all that big of a deal. Because we think, but how many of you realize it's the small that creates the big? Do you get that? It's the small that creates the big. If any of you have ever cooked, and you cook the home-cooked meal, not the microwave meal, but the home-cooked, what do? You start with a little something. I love to cook gravy at my house. Why? Because Callie hates gravy, so if we're going to get gravy, I got to cook gravy. But I did bring rice into the house after about 12 years. So we're on a progression, and my kids will say, I want to cook gravy. And how do you cook gravy? And I'm not talking about you pack it, mamas. I thought you pack it out the garbage. But what do? You got through cooking something, and you got that little bit of grease there. You put a little bit of flour, a little bit of water, a little bit of oil, a little bit of flour, and you just keep working it and working it and working it, and put your seasoning and do your stuff, whatever flavor you want to go with it. And it's the little things that create something big. You can give me a spot of oil about that big, and I can turn it into enough gravy to smother a family over their rice in fullness. It's the little that turns into the big. And so today we are heading into John chapter 4 with a bit of fear, honestly, that where we are going in John chapter 4, this event has probably been preached a little too much by a little too many people and too many times in all of history. But one thing we do know is that, you know what, no matter how common a story is, Jesus' word is always alive. Do you believe that? So today, we're going to start in the middle. Since everybody's already read their Bible and they know everything that's in there, we're just going to all jump in on the same page at John 4 and 27. 4 and oh man, I know I'm getting old when I say 4 and. If I go to preaching King James, you're going to know something's wrong with me. Let's see, I'm getting too old. Just then, nothing against it. If you like it, read it. I don't understand it. Just then, his disciples came back. They were shocked to find him, and they were shocked to find him talking to a woman, but none of them had the nerve to ask, what do you want with her? Why are you talking to her? You got to love this. I want to back up just to kind of play dumb with some of us. The context is this. Jesus and his disciples are traveling. You can look at this John in 4 and verse 1 or 2 there. And Jesus and the disciples are traveling through. So they had to go through the city of Samaria. And they come to a well outside the city. And Jesus is like, whoo, boys, I'm tired. I got to sit down and take a break. They're like, it's all right, Jesus, we got your back. I tell you what, you just keep back here. There's a nice little bench here at the well. You just sit down, you chill out. We're going to run to town and get you some grub and refreshment, some Gatorade, and we're going to come back, and then we'll just move on. And so just like, okay, I'm going to hang out here. But then when they leave, this woman walks up. And I know we're all so smart, and I know we've all read the whole Bible, and I know, what I'm going to say is pretty redundant to you, but as we read through the context of the earlier part of John chapter 4, we discover this woman has been married 5 times. And then Jesus is going to tell her, he's going to say, hey, why don't you go and get your husband and bring him back? We'll have a party. And she's like, I'm not married. He's like, oh, yeah, that's right, because you're not married, because you've been married 5 times, and the woman you're living with now is not your husband. So Jesus talks to her, and he tells her what she's done. He tells her how she's living in sin currently, but that he can fix all that. He can fill her up, and he can make her brand new with his Spirit. It's amazing that she's living in a little bit of frustration, but yet living also with faith that, you know what, there is a God, there is a Savior, and it will matter to her one day, even though her lifestyle is not according to what she also believes. And the disciples who left their old lives, they've gone to town. The disciples who left their old lives to follow Jesus, they start a conversation amongst themselves that they would never, ever, ever have with Jesus. Isn't it amazing we can gossip with our friends things we would never gossip with Jesus about? Man, can you believe he is sitting next to her? Now, how many of us would include that in a prayer time? Right down the road, there's a car pulling out in front of us. Oh, Lord, I know you're not going to let them pull up from me. We would never gossip like that. And this is what the disciples are doing. They're like, why is he talking to her? Now, I said all that to explain this. Their shock is not because of the woman's lifestyle, what she has done, because they don't even know the lady. They have no clue. They are just visiting. They're passing through. They just went into town to get some lunch and come out, and here's Jesus and this lady hanging out having a conversation. Now, their shock can be because of her race, because she's a Samaritan and they're Jews, and Samaritans and Jews have absolutely nothing to do with it. The absolute most hatred of racism that has ever existed. You think you know some racists, and you think you've been through some things, and you think you went through high school and it was the biggest segregation moment and the fights and all that. You have no idea until it comes down to the context of the Jew and the Samaritan. Because according to the Jews, the Samaritans were half-breeds, is the way they refer to them, and any other cutting down remark they could give. So that it could be because of her race, but also it can just be because she is a woman. And we learned this a little while back in the How to Beat the Odds series, that, in the culture in that time, a woman was actually just property. I mean no disrespect, because we see the greatest fighter for the equality of women came from Jesus before anyone else ever did, because the woman was just a property. He could have just, she could have been married 5 times because she loved shoes, and the man kept saying, I'm sick of all your doggone shoes in my closet and stepping on your high heels that's jagging me in my ankle. Out. And he could just, all he had to do was say a little religious chant. He had a little saying, it went 3 times, and boom, and in all the eyes of society, they were divorced, and he said, get out the door, don't come back no more. It was as simple as that. Maybe she burned the gravy, maybe she got up late, maybe she, whatever, he's like, I just don't feel the way I used to feel, whatever kind of garbage that means. So it can be just because she is a woman. Okay. So you may be wondering, what in the world does all of this have to do? It's because of this. Because of what is happening in this story, actually with the disciples that the woman sets up. It still happens in you and I today. And what is about to happen is going to show the ability that the lady had and the disciples had. But the lady used it, and the disciples sat on it. And so the very next verse, after, remember, they're like, why is he talking to her? What's he doing with her? Check this out. The very next verse, 28, it says, when they're walking up, the very next verse, the woman left her water jar beside the well, and she ran back to the village, telling everyone, verse 29, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? There's a couple of details to notice. Number one, she's a liar. He didn't tell her everything she ever did. He just told her how many times she'd been married. It's a far stretch. Number two, this is the most interesting of all. She's not even sure who he is. And she's going to a whole town. Have you ever felt like, I just feel like I don't know enough, or I wouldn't know what to say, or I just don't know how it would come out, and I'm just a little nervous. well, they may know where I've been. They may know my past. And it's just all. You ever been there? This woman doesn't even know. Said, could he possibly be the Messiah? Okay, there are some important details, though, that we don't need to miss. See, we can read our Bible like it's a checkoff list, or we can read it like it's an in-depth thing. And this could absolutely open the eyes to a greater understanding of what God has given you. Here we go. This woman, verse 28. It says she left her. Everybody say her. She left her water jar. I'm like, what is the big deal? It is her water jar. I don't know either. Everybody in here falls in one of these categories. Either you have been divorced, you know someone has been divorced, you've seen the effects of divorce. What happens in a divorce? It's common no matter where it is. It's common in marriage. The marriage routine is common and the divorce routine is common. In marriage, it is two people who they get ooey and gooey and they come together and they bring everything they had to the table together. And then when that divorce comes, they both leave feeling like they have nothing. And so for a lady who's been married 5 times in a society where she has no value and she has no right to really any possessions, it's a pretty valuable thing that it was her water jar. You say, well, this is just a stupid water jar. Yeah, but it was her water jar. Maybe if you've been through a divorce, you've really experienced this, where it may have been something that the other member destroyed before it all got settled in court and got damaged. And maybe you got it back, but it wasn't the same way that you had to leave it. And you remember thinking, you know what? I know it didn't cost hardly anything, but to me, it was special. This was her water jar. This woman's had 5 marriages. The water jar was likely a valuable thing to her because at least it was hers. Let me ask you a question. What have you really come to grasp so far about this life and Jesus that would compel you to leave the last thing you have? Because there had to be a radical encounter here to compel her to leave the last thing she had. Now, it's believed that she came to a well at a time when she would not have to face any other crowds, at noon, so she could avoid the crowds and avoid the faces. So when there was no one else there, she could go this well, and she had to leave town. So by noon, it's hot. You're thirsty. I'm ready to get my water jug on. I'm ready to move to the next thing. So this woman, what she does is she brings the little possession she had to a place that she was comfortable, which was a water well, at a time that she would not have to deal with anybody. But when Jesus speaks to her, this woman that was of no value in society, with little possessions, all of a sudden, after a little bit of excitement, quickly, she leaves every comfort and she leaves every human reasoning behind to run to a city of men that she carried no authority with, to tell them about a man that told her everything she ever did, to which, under normal circumstances, most and the people in the city probably could have thought, big deal. We all know where you've been. We all know what you've done. This isn't rocket science. Everybody knows where you lived, who you were with, and what you've done. Why are you telling us this? That's normal. But you see, when you realize, wait, something's different. I met somebody showed me I have a little something more to offer than I realized I had. When you begin to realize what it takes, you begin to take risks that seem crazy, and what was normal becomes abnormally supernatural in its effect. I love that how Jesus will, over and over and over, he picked the unlikely to do the impossible. I mean, that is the entirety of the Bible, that Jesus picked the unlikely to do the impossible. I wonder what the stories are in here today. I wonder how many times possibly you felt compelled to take a step and just rose up and got all excited and you compelled to take a step, but then logic and reasoning kicked in. And instead of taking a step, you just sat on the fear. And the fear you thought you would run into is now the fear that overtakes you. The death has come. The emptiness is now where you sit instead of where you were going. Let me ask you this. What if you considered the desire you sit on is exactly what Jesus planned to use? What if it's your reason? It literally is your reason for living, but casual reasoning took its place, and so only the emptiness remains. Can I just tell you this? You've got what it takes. You've got what it takes. I'm going to give you a little example. Whenever I was a youth pastor, I don't remember, it's quite a few years ago now, but it's somewhere in the between 2000 and 2008 range, somewhere in there, probably around 2004 or something. We were going to this event. We'd go to this event every year. We'd take the youth, and it was called To Acquire the Fire, and it was a big event at the Riverplex in Baton Rouge. And one year, this is how bad off I was. Each year, they would host like a rally for youth pastors and a leadership thing and kind of build into them. And I remember so well, so it would be several months before the event ever happened. And I remember so well the message that day about Ron Lewis. He showed a big picture of Hurricane Katrina. Yeah, it was right after Hurricane Katrina. Big picture of Hurricane Katrina coming up. And then he used the scripture where Jesus talked to the people, says, you know by the color of the clouds in the morning and the color of clouds in the evening how to plan your life for the next day. How have you gotten so wise that you've learned to observe the times, but you cannot observe the times that you live in? Don't you see what is happening right here amongst you? And it's talking about Jesus. He is walking on the planet, all he lived. And he got it, man, everybody's like fired up, like, yeah, we see what is happening. We see the revival that can take place, and we see where God is moving. And how can you not observe the time? Then he got this crazy thing, and he says, I got a challenge for you, you know. And I mean, this is how unlikely it was. I was so unlikely. I was a youth pastor who went to a youth rally. You know who I brought? My mama. Nothing against my mama or mamas, but it's kind of a weird thing when you show up with a leadership with your mama. Just saying. I was married. Were we married then? Yeah, we were married then. Because I remember I freaked another youth pastor out. It was a guy that, man, God was doing great things in him, but he just wasn't really with that flow. And I was like, yeah, we're going to fire him up, man, because we had the two largest youth groups in town at the time. And I was like, we're going to fire him up, and we're going to see God do great things. And all of a sudden, Ron Lewis said, no, start calling down heaven and praying for these people. And there's like 140 people in there in a small room, just, yeah, crying and shouting. And I'm like, yeah, I'm getting fired up. And my buddy and his wife go, I mean, they're just like, he said, Danny, this is too radical for us. But I pray God's changed him by now. Just kidding. He's a good guy. God used him. Just different. But I remember I got all fired up, and Ron said, I got a challenge for you. And he's just, you know those moments where you just like, man, tell me anything. I'll go do it right now. But when you're not being reasonable, you're just fired up with faith, and you kick reason out the door. It's a good thing to kick out. And he said, take the number of people in your youth ministry, which was 65. And he said, and double it. And I'm going, okay, that's 130. I'm good on math. And he said, I'll tell you what we're going to do, we're going to discount all the tickets by, it's like $20 or $30. He said, it's going to be $45. And if you'll buy that many tickets today, I was like, yeah, we'll do it. And then he threw the ice on the cake. He said, we're going to give you that many more. Oh, and that's 260. And I was like, yeah. And so I get all fired up, and I go back. I don't have money, y'all. I'm making like $19,000 a year. I'm sorry. Some of you come to me and you talk about struggles with your money and your bill. I'm just like, you just have no idea what God can provide. You just don't know. You need to get over the worry because God can do it. You don't need a lot. He makes it a lot. And so I go back and I go sign up, and I got a credit card because they hooked me in college with a credit card, like for $1,500 limit or something like that, and 89% interest rate or something crazy, whatever they do when they hook you in. And I go back, and I never really used it much except for some stuff that my parents would pay for when I was in college. And I go back, and I'm like, y'all, I want to buy 130 tickets, and y'all going to give me 130 more? They're like, yeah. I said, okay. I said, but I don't have the money. I'm giving you a card, and it don't have this much money on it. Can I still do it? It's going to take. They said, yeah, we give you a few days to get it all worked out. And I'm like, wow, credit cards raise limits. Did y'all know that? It was cool. It was the worst thing I ever learned. And so I said, I'm going to write this. I'm believing God. And I wrote it out and wrote all my credit card information. And then I go back home, and I call, and I'm like, credit card, will you raise my limit? They're like, what do you want to do, make a big purchase? I said, yeah, I want to take a big purchase. I'm taking a bunch of people to a youth event. They're going to get fired up with Jesus, and I need like $7,000. And they're like, okay, you got it. And I said, cool. So then I called Qualify. I was like, run my money. But here's the problem. I don't have nothing in the account. So this is a sink or swim event. I'm about to inherit a lot of $6,000 debt at really like 24% interest, something like that, if God don't move. And so the result was end up comeback. So we called it ATF 260 in a high school at that time that had, I don't know, a little over 300, 380, something like that, somewhere in those range. So you picture this is a large portion of the high school. This is absolutely nuts. It got caught fire with people in a way. My nephew decided, he said, he's the guy that got fired up and got the high school all in on it. And he starts going around the school every week, rallying up, getting more people tickets, because here's the deal. We had to pay $45 ticket, but we said, you know what, for $20 you can go and we'll pay for your food and all. Trip, night stay, the whole 9 yards. We'll take care of all that. $20. You'll just meet us right there. And so my nephew, he's going around. I remember down to the last time, and he says, and I show up. We smuggle in a boom box, and we smuggle in a goldfish, because he made a deal the last week. He said 20 more people will go on the last week. It's crunch time. He said, I'll swallow goldfish at recess. And so I show up at school. I took off work. Sometimes you got to leave work early to run to Walmart from Faraday, to run to Walmart in Natchez, to run back to Vidalia High School to try to sneak in like I was taking drugs. And I met my nephew, and I was like, here. He said, you got it? I said, yeah, I got it. And I put a goldfish, and he's like, man, ain't nobody outside. I'm going to do something about this. And he gets it up, and he puts the thing on there, cranks the rap music up, and he walks through the quad, and there wasn't nobody out there. And he said, we ain't going out like this. And he walks through the cafeteria, and all of a sudden there's this posse developing. And then he loops in through the cafeteria, and it looked like all-out war was about to happen. Like there was the hugest fight you've ever seen. And all these people, just the masses come behind him, and he's got this LLJ cool boombox thing going on. And he gets out on Christy can verify this because Rick Brown's the principal, and she's like, Miss Brown, we need you in the office. And he's like, no, I got to go outside and watch Ben swallow goldfish. And so he goes out there, and he stands up on the table. He says, all right, I need 20 people, and the hands go up, boom, 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 boom. And I think we were paying for the tickets by this point. It was just, these were the last people. We'll just give them to you. And he gets that goldfish up, and he goes, boom. He tried, but then he had a friend that he really wanted to go. A friend that unfortunately is passed now. And the friend looked at him, and he just looked through the crowd, and he said, I'll go if you'll pick it up and eat it. Boom! Boom! Down in Jesus' name all the way through the cycle. You see, the result was this. It's a cool story, a lot of good things, a lot of nutso things. Isn't it amazing how you love the things and people would love for you to do it too? And so what happened is, it was like 160 people ended up going. It wasn't 260, but you know what? We were only at 65 meeting here on a weekly basis at that point, and we ended up taking over 160 people out of town to an event where people did get saved. I remember so well a guy, and he's still fired up radical for the Lord, set apart in so many ways. And so many people, that was a night of change for them, a life change. You know what? And you say, well, it was only 160. Well, poot on you. We would have never got to a 160 if we never tried for 260. Come on. If we'd have just said, well, we got 65, might get 20 people to go. You got to let some reasoning go. And when unlikely people begin to believe God in an impossible way, the door for the impossible opens and Jesus moves. And not only does he move on you, but he moves on bringing people along beside you. So you're not alone anymore. You're in the movement together. But sometimes you got to take the step by yourself. My friend I took to the event, he wouldn't buy a single ticket. He walked in fear. We bought 260 tickets, and we saw 160 people, and we saw probably, 20% of them or something, but still it was a great deal of people turning radically to the Lord. You see, I love how over and over and over Jesus will use the unlikely to do the impossible. We did pay for all those tickets, and God did provide. It was like $6,200 just in tickets, and miraculously provided. You see, it may seem crazy to keep, for you, it may seem crazy to keep inviting someone to church who says no. But last weekend, I got to sit on those steps right there and pray with a man who said, you know what, I came because I kept telling my friends no, and their consistency stirred my curiosity. And he said, to the point that I began watching online. He said, and then you said something online, I was like, I've never heard stuff like that said before. I'm going. And then he came, and he gave his life to Jesus. You see, it's your consistency. You think you're getting a no. No, I've done everything. They're no. This guy even got mad at times. They get mad at me, and they do this, and they cuss me out. You know what? Your consistency will stir curiosity because nobody in this world is consistent about anything good anymore. So when you're consistent about the good, you stand out. You can't help it. People are consistent about the bad, but no, that's normal. Nobody's consistent about the good. How unlikely is it that you have any, let me ask you this, how unlikely is it that you have anything of worth that you can do that will cause lives to be forever transformed? How unlikely is it that because you activate what you have, a coworker will find healing and find salvation? How unlikely is it because you just open your mouth sometimes and just share and just speak and just invite and just reach out? How unlikely is it that someone may become free and move on from addiction and be a thing of the past? How unlikely is it that God could use you because people know who you've always been? Hey, can I say this? God delights in using unlikely things to bring about impossible results. And I hope with all my heart that you do feel unlikely, because that is exactly the kind of people that God does the impossible through. So if you right now feel like I'm the unlikely, then you are the absolute best candidate, and exactly why we're here today. Are you the unlikely? Then you've got what it takes. But you're going to have to quit depending on your favorite water pot and you're hiding at the favorite comfort well to see the unlikeliness become a miracle moment. You're going to have to quit depending on what's always been comfortable. So you are unlikely. Good. You've got what it takes. So now that we know that, you know what? It's time to let go. It's time to leave some things behind. Let me ask you this. What is your comfort? What is the hobbies you hide in when you want to avoid the responsibility that you know you're being led into? What is the bitterness you want to hang on to because though you understand forgiveness would be freeing, but you just don't believe they deserve to be let go yet. So you hide from God's calling to remain in your comfort, that there becomes a bitterness, a comfort in the bitterness. What is it? Maybe you know, it's the places you go. You know, the excuses you hide behind. I could list 10,000 examples, but at the end of the day, let me ask you this: where do you go? What do you do when you feel afraid to make a step that you know you should make and you even want to make? Maybe it's the circle of friends that you go that's always going to say, yeah, you're right, that's crazy. Thank you, I knew that was crazy, I'm not going to do it, thank you. I mean, where are the places that we hide? What's the comfort? What is the sure thing that you hold on to because you let fear keep you from the faith-led unknown? Can I be honest with you about what brings the greatest fear to me? The thing that brings the greatest fear to me is truly the unknown. Sounds simple. I know it sounds weird, but I always have this hope for what's next. But there's also always a little anxiety about what's next. Like, I'm really nervous about just making this step, and so then it becomes, well, what if I make this step? What is God going to ask of me next? What if I invite somebody and then God asks me to pray for them in the middle of McDonald's? You know, what is it that he's going to ask next? And so the fear of what's next keeps me from even anxiety is the fear of the present. Do any of y'all ever had that? You know, the one thing I've learned in so many testimonies and so many stories, that while good things may indeed come to those who wait, only death comes to those who sit. And we've all seen it in a physical, tragic way of people who just sit and sit and sit and don't get out. And they binge watch and they eat and sit and don't get out. And the body just decays. Good things may come to those who wait, but sit for too long and death comes. And then we don't have to fear what's next anymore. We don't have to fear what's ahead because fear overtakes right where we sit. Last weekend I was at Walmart, and I'm not the guy that just picks up, that is talking on the phone going to the store. That's just lame. Sorry if you do it. It's just, that's like early cell phone users, Remember watching this guy I used to watch when we used to go to the mall on Wednesday nights after church, and there was this guy, sometimes he'd be coming there too, and he'd get there a little bit after us, and he'd just walk all across the parking lot all cool and everything. He's in high school, and he's cool, and as soon as he got to the door and opened the door, boom, he threw up his little Nokia 5610 or whatever it was, and the entire time, because we'd sit in Taco Casa and watch him, and then he'd never got the phone until he'd come back out, and he'd walk out the door, and as soon as he walked out the door, he'd put his phone back in his pocket, just looking cool. It's lame to walk around on the phone, but I did it. I did it. I'm walking through Walmart last weekend, and last Saturday even, and I'm talking on the phone the whole time. I'm like, this is so lame, but here I am. I just felt compelled, really, to talk on it, as weird as that seems. And on the other end of the line, I mean, I've even got my kids walking around, so I look like a bad parent, right? And so, and I got all these thoughts in my head, and so this guy, all of a sudden, it comes out of nowhere. He just starts encouraging me and starts building me up. It had nothing to do with the conversation. He just like, boom. I'm going, and he starts telling me things that I really don't even believe about myself. And I'm just like, dude, okay, you know, just rock on, praise God, just kind of blow and go. And but I noticed something begins changing. The more he talks, the more there's a change happening, until it results at the place where we're checking out. We just got a few items, and we're checking out, and I'm talking on the phone, and then all of a sudden I'm looking across, and I'm looking at this guy in front of me. I'm like, why am I talking on the phone when I could be talking to him? And then my kids with me, so I was like, here, talk to this guy. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, dude, this Saturday night, what you doing tomorrow? You got to work tomorrow? No. Hey, man, you ought to come to church with me, dude. You would love it, man. It'd be right up your alley. I can tell by the way you are. And I'm trying to talk kind of loud because all of a sudden now, because of what this guy's saying to me on the phone, and he's not like, go out and evangelize in the name of the Lord. I am praying for you, and there sitteth under it. He's not doing all that. He's just talking and just being godly and being a Christian and doing what we do for each other, just building one another up. And I'm like, man, you ought to come with me and love it. And then we get to talking. He's like, yeah, I know where that place is. And anyway, he ain't got here yet, but he said he's coming. And I'm trying to talk. Now I've went, because, see, I'm the guy who also, as weird as it seems, I'm the preacher. The video's being run. It can land in whoever, wherever. I talk to you like this all day long. But I'm also the guy that, you know what, walk in the store, and I'm nervous about talking. Any of y'all do that kind of stuff? Maybe you work jobs where you have to do a certain way, but outside that job, it's just, you got to work it up. And so I'm even nervous about inviting people to church. How stupid is that? I left my job believing what God was going to do here, to give more time to invest here. And I'm going to be afraid to invite somebody? How stupid. But fear is stupid, isn't it? And so all of a sudden I find myself going from fear to going, I want everybody in the whole place to come. I want everybody in the place. So we're speaking loud and weird and just hoping somebody goes, what are you talking about? And we'll shout out. I always dream of being one of those people, we got healing on aisle 9. Everybody come on. I dream of that. I read those stories. They're too good. But it's because that's me? No. Because of surrounding with the right people and just talking to the right person at the right moment who ends up talking in a way that deposits faith that becomes an activity. It's because of what he did, not because of what I did. You know what? There's something crazy that happens when we surround ourselves with the right people. We begin to get ourselves in the right community. I'm going to tell you something. The deeper you get in the community here, the deeper your faith will be inspired. You'll be encouraged to love one another better. You'll be encouraged to just be inspired by one another. You'll be encouraged in your words. I guarantee you, the deeper you get, going through the growth track and getting on the dream team and begin serving, doing whether it's children's or nurseries or hospitality or cafe or media or whatever the angle is, there's something. The deeper you get, the more faith it inspires, that comes alive. And so his words gave me faith. You know what? When I look at that, I see Jesus here. Look at what happened with this lady. She went to a public place at a time that no one else would be there, so she could avoid the fears of what people would say or how they would look. Her past caused fear in her present. But Jesus met her there, and fear was overcome, and she ran to a city. And watch what happens in verse 30. So the people came streaming, like they came out of a Vidalia High School gymnasium that day, came streaming from the village to see him. The disciples went to the same city, had the same opportunity, and they came back with lunch. They sat on it. She had the opportunity to run in fear, but instead she ran back with what Jesus gave her. What did Jesus give her? It's so simple. He just gave her a story to tell. We'll talk more about that next week. But he just gave her a story to tell. She realized, you know what? I have what it takes, not because she knew what would happen next, but because she knew what Jesus was doing with her now. His words in her fear gave her the resource of faith to take a step to see the next. His words in her fear gave her the resource of faith to take the next. Today, I believe with all my heart, I mean this. This is not just a cheesy slogan. This isn't just a way to craft something that I found a video that fit it and all that kind of stuff. I'm saying this pastoral. I really genuinely 100% believe you got what it takes. I do, on an individual, personal level. The passion of, can I say this? The passion of this church is for the uncommitted, the undecided, and the unchurched, and for them to become passionate followers of Jesus Christ. Now I've got a question for you. Simple. And don't just let the teacher's pets answer this. I need real answers. Do you believe that Jesus can use you? Serious. Do you really believe that Jesus can use you? Because if you do, we got activity. This is what we will do. If you believe that Jesus can, I'm not asking that you have all the reasonings and all the understanding. If you truly believe that Jesus can use you, I want to ask you, I'm not going to call it, well, I'm not going to do anything weird. I want to ask you right where you are just to stand up. I don't care what you did this morning. I'm serious. You're not going to have to arm wrestle for it. You're not going to have to prove it. If you really believe that, with near 100% involvement, this is what we're going to do. Simple. Easter is 2 weeks away. And you know people that are uncommitted, that are undecided, and that are unchurched. Uncommitted, undecided, unchurched. I'm going to say it again. Uncommitted, undecided, unchurched. What does that mean? Not talking about another church person. And they need Jesus, but they do not realize they need Jesus. Aren't you glad that somebody reached out to you when they knew what you needed and you didn't realize what you needed? So today you got your paper, and you should have got a pen. I don't have a pen with me. You got a paper and a pen. It says My 5. If you really believe that Jesus can use you, this is what I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask you to get that paper, and you're going to write on it now. And I want you to write down, this is beyond me, I wanted to say 3. And it was like God saying, oh, you're going to be scared, huh? Because I came up with this number, and then I was like, no, that's too ridiculous. I'm going to say 3. 3 is safe. But it's like that conviction. You're going to preach what you believe and let the unlikely do the impossible? Danny, you're pretty unlikely. Open the door. And for the uncommitted, undecided, unchurched, people who need Jesus, but they don't even know they need Jesus, I want to ask you to write those 5 name downs on a piece of paper. That's it. 5, up to 5 names. Up to 5 names. And then there comes a responsibility. You see, right here, you thought I had a trash can. No, we got the God can. What I'm going to ask you to do is write those 5 names down. I'm going to ask you to walk up in a minute, and I'm going to ask you to drop their name in the God can. Believe in what God can do. But that's not the end of it. For the next 2 weeks, as a church, we're going to agree, you won't know all the names, but we're going to agree to pray for every name that is in that can to give their life to Jesus between now and Easter. Let me do a little math for you there. That's just under 500 people. We're going to believe for Jesus to do the impossible over the next 2 weeks. Now, the other responsibility is this. I'm going to ask you with your 5 that you commit to praying for those 5 and inviting them between now and Easter. Repeatedly. Because now is when they will accept your invitation more than ever before. Who's the person you've been reaching out to? Who's the one you've reached out to but kept putting you off? This is the absolute best time. And together, we're going to pray for them every day between now and then. We're going to pray for all of them, but you're going to pray independently for your 5. you are going to pray for your 5 every day, and you are going to invite those people numerous times between now and Easter. And we have these cards on the back table back there, the numerous cards. Get them, you can get them there, easy thing to pass with a time and all that kind of stuff. And together we are going to see what Jesus will do through you. Because it's not through the preacher, and I praise God we've got a great band, but it's not through the band, it's through the church. And we're going to see trust for God to do the impossible. And so as a faith step, can you please give me something faster? As a faith step, they love that. As a faith step, because this is a celebration moment, as a faith step, we're going to walk up and let everybody do this and put your name in the can. And we're going to agree on that today, and we're going to see what God is going to do over the next 2 weeks. Do you believe that Jesus can use you? Amen. Amen. Well, lead us.